Hello everyone, welcome to RAO'S Academy for Competitive Exam. Today in this session we are going to discuss about the important topics under space technology. Space technology has always been the favorite topic of UPSC because, for example, you can take mains of 2023 wherein they have asked a question on Chandrayaan 3, and even in the earlier exams, mains 2022, they have asked a question on James Webb Space Telescope launched by NASA. Right, so all these questions and even other questions show that space technology is an important topic, and that's why in order to study this particular topic, what kind of points you should focus on, that is what we are going to discuss in this particular video. So let us start with the important points related to space technology. So in this particular subject, firstly, you should know more about orbits. There has to be a proper amalgamation of current as well as static topics, because on the basis of static topics you will be able to understand current affairs in a better way. So orbits, which is a static topic, is important to know, and in orbits you should be aware of low Earth orbit, which is the closest orbit to Earth's surface, which is also called as LEO, and this is the orbit which is primarily used for the launch of remote sensing satellites. Next we have medium Earth orbit, and this medium Earth orbit or medium Earth orbits, they are primarily used for the launch of navigation satellites. Next we have geosynchronous orbit, which are also called as GSO, and these orbits, geosynchronous orbits, are the most important orbits for the launch of telecommunication satellites. And there is a special case of geosynchronous orbit, which is geostationary orbit, also called as GEO. Right, so these orbits you should be aware of, and apart from these orbits, few other orbits are there, like polar orbits, and its special case called as sun synchronous polar orbits. Right, so these orbits are also important. And lastly, geostationary transfer orbit. Right, so these orbits are important from the exam's perspective. Once you know these orbits, it would be easier for you to understand which satellite is placed in which orbit and why. Right, so these are different orbits. Now once orbits are done, it is important to know about launch vehicles as well. So launch vehicles. Now what are launch vehicles? Launch vehicles are the rocket systems that are used for the launch of satellites. Right? Satellites are taken to their intended orbits by these launch vehicles. So under launch vehicles, what is important is the concept of their working. So how do they work? They work on the basis of stages. There are different stages of launch vehicle, and those stages are fired one after the other. Then you should also be aware of Indian launch vehicles, like SLV3, like ASLV, These two we do not use anymore. They are obsolete. They are obsolete. Then we also have PSLV, then GSLV, and most important version of GSLV, which is GSLV Mark III, which has been renamed as LVM3 now. Right, so these different launch vehicles you should be aware of, right? And apart from that, there is one more launch vehicle that has been developed recently. It is called as SSLV, Small Satellite Launch Vehicle, right? And then there is one current development going on with respect to the development of launch vehicles, and that is reusable launch vehicles. Reusable launch vehicles, RLV. And so all these important aspects you should be aware of with respect to launch vehicles. UPSC has already asked questions on these two in 2018's prelims examination. In 2018's prelims examination, question was asked on these two, and you can expect a question on reusable launch vehicle because they play an important role in order to reduce the cost of access of space, and also they help us reduce space debris. Right, so that is about launch vehicles. Then once launch vehicles are done, you should also be aware of satellites. Satellites. So there are different types of satellites, and those satellites are, first is remote sensing satellites. Remote sensing satellites. And these remote sensing satellites are also known as Earth observation satellites. Earth observation satellites. Earth observation satellites. Fine. So these are primarily used to know more about the features on Earth's surface. And these satellites have been launched by India as well. For example, IRS series, Cartosat series, RESAT series, and latest EOS series are all the satellites that can be put under the category of remote sensing satellites. Then next is navigation satellites. Navigation satellites. These navigation satellites are used for navigation, for getting positioning and timing data. Right? For example, Google Maps that we use are based on navigation satellites only. And India has its own regional navigation system called as IRNSS, which is also called as NAVIC. Right? Then next important types of satellites are telecommunication satellites. Telecommunication satellites. These telecommunication satellites provide us with various kind of services like broadband services, internet services, tele-education, telemedicine, direct-to-home services are also provided by them. Right? And India also has its own telecommunication satellites like GSAT, then INSAT, and the latest is CMS series. CMS series of satellites is the latest telecommunication satellite series started by ISRO. And then last and the most important types of satellites is space exploration satellites. Space exploration satellites. What are space exploration satellites? Space exploration satellites are those that provide us information about the universe, right? What are the different features, different planets, stars, different features of those planet stars we know on the basis of space exploration satellites. And India has also launched space exploration satellites like Mangalyaan, Chandrayaan, Aditya L1, and even in future we will be launching Shukrayaan. So all these are space exploration satellites, right? When we study about satellites, prime focus should be on Indian satellites, especially these three, right? Remote sensing, navigation and telecommunication satellites of India become important from the exam's perspective. But in fourth category, that means in space exploration satellites, apart from satellites launched by ISRO, it is also important to know more about satellites launched by NASA, European Space Agency, and other important space agencies like China National Space Administration, Roscosmos, JAXA, etc. Why? Because questions have been asked by UPSC, especially on the space exploration missions launched by NASA and European Space Agency. So they become important from the exam's perspective as well, right? And whatever current developments are going on with respect to space becomes important from the exam's perspective, right? So that is what you should be able to know about space technology in order to solve questions related to space technology in a better way. So that is about this particular class on the information related to space technology. Thank you.